Hey, Jeremy. Hey,
Hey,
everyone.
Peter.
Thanks for tuning in to our weekly podcast, the Retrospective, where we talk about engineering leadership topics loosely tied to all the things that we produce during the week on our respective websites. This week, we will discuss big article from Jeremy about the 4 must-have weekly ceremonies for engineering managers and teams to have in order to have a fluid, smooth, and predictable execution. And then we talk a little bit about my AI experiment in coding and similar topics.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, let's get into it.
Cool. So you had a very good article this week. I really like because it addresses arguably the most important part of an engineering manager, being responsible for the delivery of the team. And you gave a good template on what are the must-have weekly meetings for engineering managers. I see here not focusing on. I mean, the value is not the meeting, the word, the ceremony itself, but what they represent. So can you introduce it or explain it briefly for those who didn't read the newsletter, and then we can discuss a bit.
Yeah. So this week I really focused on rituals for engineering managers, and like maybe taking a step back. I feel that the role of an engineering manager, and you'll hear me repeating it loads of times. And I didn't invent this, but the role of any manager in every business is twofold. One is to deliver a result that's aligned with what the business needs. And the second is to look after and grow the people in the team, beyond the company, and it's focusing on delivery of results and individual and collective performance of the team. And I think that there needs to be some kind of structure in the week, and within engineering, I feel like there's a way you can do that. In this article, I talk about the 4 rituals. I kind of briefly summarize them. The weekly kickoff, the daily sync, it's like a stand-up or some kind of sync, one-to-ones with the team members, and a weekly review. And I focus on the week, and I think it's really important to mention this. I focus on the week because 1 week is a fantastic rhythm and a cadence. I think it's like a drum beat that keeps the whole team going. Whether you're doing 1 week sprints, 1 day sprints, 2 week sprints, 6 weeks, whatever the cadence is that you're using, I think the 1 week of like a unit of doing something and putting out at the end of it an update, which is partly what's in there in what I describe, and also maybe taking a chance at a moment to step back and reflect on what you've done as a team is a really, really tight, that 1 week is a really ideal unit. And it rolls up well into reflecting on months and quarters and so on. So that's why I focus on the week. And then within that, basically just to describe the rituals. First, I did actually, in the article, I stepped back a little bit and I talked a little bit about planning of projects and milestones. And the reason I felt it was important, and I'm probably going to write a whole article about this in the future. But
I think it's important to understand what you're thinking on this.
Yeah, in fact, I originally wrote this article without talking about projects and milestones, but I felt it was, and the reason I inserted it in here, and I talk about is I feel like I needed to give the context that for me in the weekly kind of planning session, you should be looking at what are the goals for the week, and as part of that, you need to be understanding what are the projects that we have in flight, and what are the milestones. When are they coming up? Is there a milestone due at the end of this week? Do we have a milestone coming up next week? And you should be having that context in your mind as you go into the planning, and also throughout the week as you're probably sometimes having to replan things, so that you can provide to your stakeholders the right kind of updates around your projects, because you should be giving your stakeholders updates on the timelines of things. And so for me, I just wanted to kind of give a recap, which is ideally for me, the projects that you do shouldn't really be more than 6 weeks. And if your work mostly will probably take more than 6 weeks. That's fine too. Just make it smaller, make it more a series of smaller 6-week projects.
Mm-hmm.
Because 6 weeks is good enough to pretty much everyone should be able to ship something. And frankly, like
Yeah.
the reason for me behind this is think about it from a business perspective or a user perspective. We want to be shipping some kind of incremental visible value to users so that we can learn.
Mm.
Might even just be more internal, might be just a cohort of users. But having something out there is worth allowing us to learn. And I think 6 weeks is reasonable for
Mm-hmm.
something. Obviously, you can go shorter. That's fine too. That's perfect, even better. But sometimes when stuff gets bigger, don't let yourself go over 6 weeks. It's a pretty good rule of thumb.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't need to set in advance that I'm going to work in 6 weeks projects. It depends on project by project. Sometimes you can have a bigger one, and then maybe you just have a 2-week discovery kind of project that's one milestone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, like if it's going to take longer than 6 weeks, then find a way to slice it into slightly
Mm,
shorter groups. And then obviously within that project, don't just have like blank, we're going to be working on this for 4 weeks or whatever. Then you've got to slice it up again. And maybe the
mm,
first part, as you say, is like a week of discovery. And then the second
mm,
part is the skeleton of CI and the tests and a few other things. And the third one is like the end-to-end happy path. And then you start to add on some error checking, and then you have like maybe a super simple feature that isn't ready for prime time for all users, but throughout all of that, you've actually been integrating it into production under a feature flag. And now you maybe can turn it on in a particular environment, maybe for internal users or a cohort of
mm.
internal users or whatever, but it's there. It's you're constantly integrating and you're shipping.
Yeah.
So that's the idea
Okay.
behind
Sorry
it.
to yeah. We're of the past. So
Yeah.
how what's happening on the Monday kickoff?
Yeah, so with this in your mind of like this is the mental model I want to come into thinking about projects and milestones. And by the way, I chose the word um, projects and milestones. They're not words I like. I really prefer like I honestly really I think I wrote it in here, but like
Yeah.
I prefer
Initiatives and increments, right?
yeah, product initiative and a product increment, like an increment or as a slice, like it because they convey a better meaning. Like projects and milestones definitely makes you think into um, old school waterfall project management and
Mm,
everything else.
mm,
But it's just still the terminology that people understand immediately what I mean when I say it.
yeah.
Whereas if I have to say this is like an increment or an initiative, it can be very confusing, and I think you don't have to have that to make this accessible.
Yeah. What I really like I'm a bit it doesn't matter so much to me about the initiative or project. I get your point, but what I really like in the increment word as opposed to milestone is that it's really focusing on delivering some incremental value to the user. You cannot really have an increment saying that, I don't know, we create the tables for storing user data. I don't think that would be a good increment. A better increment is maybe that I don't know, one login session is permanent and not temporary anymore, because that's like an incremental value for the user.
Exactly.
It enforces this user focus.
And that's why I like I feel like change the language and you can change the culture, and
Exactly. Yeah.
because they're inextricably linked together. So yeah,
All
yeah,
right. On to the Monday kickoff.
yeah. So I mean, hopefully this one is not like too controversial, but I think it's the one that a lot of people. I think there's two meetings in here that people miss, right?
Hmm.
Or they don't quite do in a certain way, which is this weekly kickoff and then the end of the week wrap up one. But for me, this meeting is super important. It's super important that everybody in the team is actually part of it. It's not like it shouldn't be maybe just the engineering manager and a tech lead and a product manager getting together and
Hmm.
deciding for everybody. I think it's really important that that in this meeting you sit down, and at the end of it, what for me the target outcome is that the team is aligned on what their goals are for the week. And most importantly, each team member knows what they need to do and they've committed to do what they will do. If you want to have a high performing team, then people have to have clarity on what's expected of them and what good looks like. And this is not about micromanaging. This is about like, I will do my part for what the team needs to do. And it's also like, it's an opportunity to call out, I need help. Okay, I'm going to work with you. We're going to work together on this. Or whatever or it's the two of us that are shipping this feature at the end of the week. It's also important to start with the end in mind, the end of the week in mind. So you're going to say, what's the team going to look like at the end of the week? What are we going to demo at the end of the week? And I'm a big fan of demos. I personally think that if you do work in a week's work, there should be something demoable. Might be a document, might be literally, here's the document. It might be something super technical, and like you could just record a super technical video about an API or a refactor that you did that makes the team's life better. But by starting by saying, what are we going to have at the end of the week? What are we going to demo at the end of the week? You are creating you're kind of like creating a visualization of what the end. It's like sports visualization. How am I going to be in the race? How in this moment, how am I going to react? And that is what you're doing. You're planting the visualization up. It's super important. And partly what I say in here is in my article is I'm saying you need to not just like have that, but create a visual, like have a label or a tag or a view of your week, of the things that you commit to in the week, and put everything else to the side. Like just take it off the board, make it. And so that's why I prefer like some kind of Kanban. I'm a fan. I prefer using Kanban and having even in Scrum. I think it's still, you end up having a board. Have a board of what the week looks like. And if your week, and this is super important, if you regularly have unplanned work that comes in, bugs, other tasks that your incidents, requests, plan for that. Like, don't plan a fully planned week. As an engineering manager, one of the and now in my article, I don't go into all the detail of this because I almost feel like there's a whole other article just on that and how to run this meeting and what to think about and so on. But I just, plan for the unplanned that comes every week. Don't plan.
By this, you mean plan with some slack in the calendar of the team?
Yeah, like I'm hoping that you're counting and you have some you have some knowledge of your capacity of the team in terms of what you can achieve, and some idea of like the frequency of unplanned work that comes in, whether it's bugs or other things. And I'm hoping that you also, and this is the point of this meeting, is that who's not going to be there this week because of holidays, because they're
that's the easier part. But it's really hard to plan with by definition unplannable stuff. Like I don't know, we're gonna bring down production on Wednesday and we're gonna spend half a day trying to bring it back.
But that's why I don't put. I mean, you probably have an idea of,
it was a bad example.
But you have an idea of like bugs that you're generally that we kind of come in and we have to do some level of triage. And there's a lot of patterns to deal with this. I'm not going to, but I mean, you could have like some individual in the team who's the firefighter for the team, taking care of the all the interrupt work while everyone else works or whatever. But like, there's other mechanisms that you have in there. But this is the meeting where you collectively create clarity about the week. And my view is what's really important is this is not just the job of like, what are all the developers in the team going to do? It should be, what is the product manager? What is if you have a designer in the team or whoever's in the team, but their tasks should be in there too. Everybody's work should be visualized. Engineering manager, what are you doing this? What are the extra things beyond like, obviously all the meetings and so on? Have you committed to doing some things? Make sure your tasks are in there too. Obviously, depends on some of the things that you might be doing, but some stuff. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
if you're doing a pay review or whatever.
That's team execution.
But like anything that you.
Yeah, but like you would go as far as saying that, I don't know, interviewing candidates.
I think you've got to look at the week, and this comes from also the kind of planning from GTD, getting things done, and different other philosophies, but it's ultimately it all boils down to you look at the week and you try and match up your calendar for the week with the tasks that you have, and if you have a few interviews, then maybe put them on there, to visualize that was also some of the work that you did, because you want to visualize all the things. And if someone comes back and says, why did that week the team not get so much done? Oh, well, maybe we actually interviewed 4 candidates and we had a workshop. But if it's there,
Plus,
you see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, there is the transparency aspect for the rest of the team that brings alignment. Like, if I don't know, one of the things that I'm going to do is about I don't know, spending some time with customer support, reviewing the most important tickets or issues with our stack, then it informs the teams also that maybe there's going to be some incoming bugs and why they are happening at this time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So make it, this is all part of like the other mantras that, visualize all your work, make your work, make it visible, show your work. So the demos are part of, show your work, and so on. So I think this is super crucial meeting.
And you insist that everyone in the team should be part of it, like, because some teams, I know they have a way of working where the leadership of the team, the PM, the EM, maybe the design lead, maybe a tech lead, they meet like half an hour before this meeting, like align on strategies, so they don't waste the time of developers fighting about what to work on, and they sit there awkwardly. And then comes the big meeting with the team where they can be more efficient. What do you think about this?
I'm not really a fan of that, because I think that you want the information to be moved and the decisions to be moved as close to the people who are going to be doing the work, and you want them to be taking the decisions. And so I'm not really a fan of spoon feeding that. Now, I've seen teams where that happens, and I've seen developers, especially, who just say, like, just give me the tickets and I'll do them.
Yeah, just tell me what to do.
And I think that's a major problem. And maybe I can talk, maybe there's a whole other article about moving away from that way of working, but I reject that approach, because I think that we are knowledge workers, and that I want to unleash the intelligence and creativity of individuals. And I think that you can best do that when you don't spoon feed them and we don't micromanage them. And and the organizations that I would like to be part of, that I want to lead, that I want to, I think, like, people who want to be like that may have less of a place if they don't, like, I'll do my best to make sure that someone moves into a different way, but like, there's less place. I don't think there's that much place for people who want to insist on being like that in my organization. Maybe they can go work in a feature factory organization that's more like that,
Yeah. I actually agree with you. It was a provocative question. That I find a lot of non-obvious value in keeping everyone together in these discussions, and this lies in the alignment of the context. And it often happens when a developer is implementing a feature that seemed like ready to work on, and there are a lot of micro questions coming up about details. And if the developer knows the reason why we are doing this development, what we want to achieve with this change, a big part of those questions can be answered, and the developer is going to make better decisions on how she's implementing this. So and it all boils down to my belief that the single unit in execution is not the individual but the team. So working together as a team and being there on all these ceremonies, I think it's important.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of articles that we could, like, or topics that we're spawning from this.
Yeah.
But I think this is a super important meeting. And that there's a bit of advice in here, but I feel like I could write a whole article or several
Yeah.
articles on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Moving on.
Okay. So we achieved the outcome. The team is aligned on what the week's gonna look like. Everyone knows what to do. Start to work. We're going into the week, and then another important part, as you say, is the daily sync or
Yeah.
the stand-up in Scrum.
Yeah, there needs to be some kind of connection across the team of what how are we doing? It's almost like at least once a day, just taking a small moment to reflect. How are we doing? Do I need help? Is there some issues? Now, ideally it shouldn't come up in that sync. It should have already come up before, but this is a clear moment to do it. And frankly, when you're as a team, and especially for people who are hybrid or remote, distributed, or not all in the office, connect socially. It's an important part of it. Now, I've seen teams do different ways, whether they do some of this, and I mean, ideally, for me, the status is async, and then the meeting is, it's like everyone make sure that all their boards or whatever are updated, and they communicate some kind of update to the team async, and then you have asynchronous conversation. In some teams, that doesn't have to happen every day. The sync connection could be like on Monday we do some kind of planning and get together. On Wednesday we have like we do like a mini more face-to-face connection, and then on Friday or whatever we again, and in between it's all asynchronous, but whatever works for you. But I think the important part here is that the result is that every day everyone connects somehow on a human level with each other, and that any issues and blockers have been raised and addressed. This is so that you don't get to the end of the week and discover, oh, surprise, we missed our goal, or we missed the milestone, and we have a whole more week's work to do, or that we needed to
or even worse, somebody did something that was not planned and was a waste of work and efforts.
Yeah, we added stuff to the week's board and we didn't discuss it, and we didn't, also even worse, or equally worse, I would say, we realize as we're doing the work that this milestone in the scope that we originally had, we're going to miss at the end of the week if we try, because as you do work, you always accumulate more work. And so we didn't have the conversation about this week's milestone and say, okay, how can we still hit the outcome that we wanted for this milestone, but de-scope a bunch of this stuff so that we can at least still ship this thing that we wanted, right? And get the learning that we wanted to by the end of this week. And if we don't have that conversation, and then we go to our stakeholders and we say, oh yeah, it's going to take another week, like it's like, wow, really bad.
This is very important. Let's stay here a bit, because you show two patterns about how teams react to delays, which are arguably inevitable. One way is that stick to the milestone, show something, deliver something, however trivial, minimal that is, but keep on showing something. And the other is saying that we're on track, a little bit delayed. We figured it's going to take another week. Just wait and we will show you the results at the end of the next week, not this week. Obviously, we are arguing for the first one, but I think it's important to point out why. And the reason for me is to get feedback on your work. It ties back to your earlier article about sharing something at 20% and getting feedback. It's the same with projects delivery. Like if you just de-scope the milestone and just show something, you have the chance to receive immediate feedback, and that feedback informs the second week.
You delay your learning by a week, and your stakeholders trust you less. The
trust issue. That's another thing. Yeah.
If you're working on a current milestone, that date should not change. There should be, like we talked about earlier, maybe the incident that blew apart the week or whatever, but it should be really like kind of like a black swan event. You need to be like on top of your current milestone, and you should have a pretty clear idea of the next milestone date. And by the time you finish your current milestone, the next milestone date should be super locked in. And that is part of the job of the engineering manager to coach the team and to it's to help that happen. And obviously sometimes it can take, there's a learning period to get to that level of predictability, but that is what good looks like. That is the baseline of what good looks like. And I don't, you shouldn't be micromanaging to get to it. You shouldn't like be over controlling and whatever. You need to do it in a way that it's actually, this is the challenge. It's not
Yeah.
easy. You're not a project manager, but in fact, the team members need to be owning these, and your goal is to coach that in the team.
Yeah, so they can do that.
So they can do
Yeah.
that. And like, this is the other point that I make later, is that, and maybe we can talk about the end of the week review as well, but like
Yeah.
team members, they should be learning how to break up the projects they're involved on together and be updating their milestones. It's not your job as the EM, the engineering manager, to do that. It's actually their job. Your job is to make sure it happens. You're ultimately accountable for it, but your goal is to coach them to be able to be on top of it. And
Yeah.
so this is,
Yeah, we can talk about it with the week review, because I have some thoughts on this around autonomy. But sticking to the stand-up, what stood out for me in your advice is that your target outcome for the daily sync is team members connect with each other on a human level throughout the week. And then the second part is, I know there is no order, but still, any issues and blockers have been raised and addressed. This second part is what Scrum's daily stand-up is all about. What did I do? What am I planning to do? What are the impediments? Your point of bringing in the team health, it's very new to this, or very unique. Why do you feel the need for this being so strong?
I emphasized it, and I purposely put it in front, because I think you could just, if you don't think about it, if you don't focus on that part of it, if there isn't those lighthearted moments, the jokes, the connections throughout the week of like, how's your week going? Are you all right?
Yeah, what's up with your dog?
Yeah, like whatever. Then you're just really a feature factory, and then you can your half of your time with your team is just focused on like, where's your work? How's your work? What's going on? I need to report to the stakeholders, and you just lose the part about what makes teams work really well. Is that they get to know each other, they get to complete each other's sentences, they cover for each other when they're in a difficult places. People have ups and downs, they have like good weeks and bad weeks, and these are the people that you spend more time with than your family and your immediate, like, really good friends and stuff. And I think like that human connection is important. Now,
yeah, I just to add, and after I'm gonna have a practical question, but just to add, if I have to argue, like, yes, this builds up a healthier team, and it's a really good way to spend time. As you said, we spend at least 8 hours of our wake time per day with team members. But I'm arguing that it also helps in a more practical way. It brings very useful context about your team members. Like, if I see they had a bad day, I'm not gonna be so hard on them on the pull request review.
Yeah.
It's
maybe they're being really rude in the pull request review.
Yeah, and exactly, and it helps me interpret it better. That okay, this is not personal. They had a shitty day, or I don't know. It's just like, as you say, we are humans. We're working with humans. Having this extra context and not just reading a status report, and that's why I'm a bit against the async stand-ups. Having this personal context, it gives some extra layer of information that's hard to put a pin on it why it's important, but it makes everything smoother.
Yeah, I think it's really valuable.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're only seeing each other as a team, once a week or whatever, then it's
and this is especially valuable for distributed teams, to your point, where because a lot of this extra context, it happens naturally in the office when everyone arrives and we have a coffee before work, or
go for lunch together.
Water cooler chat. Yeah, go for lunch together. Super important. But distributed teams, we don't have this, so we need to replicate somehow.
Yeah, we
And
do.
my practical question was that, do you have any tips for engineering managers, how they can, encourage this kind of discussions? It's hard to find a balance, especially if a team is fairly new, they don't know each other. Like icebreaker questions, or just let everyone chit chat a bit before we jump onto anything you can advise.
So there's kind of like getting over the hump in the team, right? You getting people to a point where it just feels free and easy, and everyone's kind of like they know each other really well. I think having an icebreaker every stand-up is overkill, feels uncomfortable, whatever.
Yeah.
I think you could probably in those, in the weekly kind of kickoff meeting, you could probably start with some kind of more of an icebreakers thing.
Mm.
It could be literally as simple as what do you get up to over the weekend.
Mm.
Though
Yeah.
that even gets, whatever. But like the other aspect that I think the thing I would do is like, if you're an engineering manager and you're always running this meeting, it can also feel like Groundhog Day and hard. And so I think the other aspect of it is the facilitator of these meetings, including the kickoff and whatever, could rotate a little bit within the team. And there's lots of reasons why that's good, but some of it is actually just empathy from the other team members about it, and they can all joke a little bit more about like trying to, what are they trying to achieve, and the other part is their own growth, and maybe some of them, I think, helping people grow as leaders, and so on. So there's lots of reasons why rotating the facilitator role is it's actually valuable. So I think, and then I think it's part of it is the accelerant in all of this is getting people together regularly face to face, so that then the moments when you're in stand-ups or whatever are free and easy. And honestly, it's the whole point is to have people take interest in each other's work as well. And so I think there's other aspects of this, like maybe mobbing that we talked about a little bit last week, and pairing, where you actively you always have two people working on something. You never have one person. Generally, the rule should be not having one person on their own. At least then the two people take interest in each other's work and the updates. But the other part is then when you're mobbing as well, then you're enlisting that kind of interest in the other maybe things that people know. So then there's multiple vectors. There's no like, this is the perfect way to run. I don't know if I can come with it. I don't know if you have it, but I don't have a perfect answer to say this is the best format for this thing.
Oh no, because that would be obnoxious. Like it takes out from the equation the specificities of the team.
Yeah.
Every team is different.
Yeah. So yeah, and then like the next meeting that I talk about is the one-to-one. And this is, I mean, I think probably this is a huge topic.
That's what I wanted to suggest, that maybe we can keep this short because I think it's a bit of an outlier of the impact on the team execution. It has a huge impact in the long term, but maybe not on the weekly scope.
Yeah.
But I really like that you included it in, because I often saw that when things happen, and we are getting delayed and everything, so many meetings. Oh, hey, Joe, everything is okay with you, right? We can skip this week's one-on-one and then next week we catch up. No.
Yeah.
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 So I like that you included it.
I have it. I think
must-haves.
I think it's like, it's this other part. You've got we just talked a lot about delivery, but this is the other pillar. Helping everyone be high performers for achieving their potential. And this is the critical meeting between someone and their manager, and it's sacrosanct. This is not a status meeting. I really emphasize that. Not a status meeting, not for you to look and say, oh, how are you getting on with your tasks and blah, blah, blah. I mean, obviously the work is part of the coaching, so stuff comes up, but it's not about so that you can update the board, so that you can go and have a good weekly update to your stakeholders.
Yeah.
It might be that you actually have to coach them in how to do it. Like, this is how you use the tool or whatever, but it's not
Yeah.
like, tell me where you are and, I see that this hasn't moved. What's going on? You have another meeting
Yeah.
for that. You have, yeah,
What I find very useful is this mindset of this is not your meeting, this is their meeting.
exactly.
So if they want this to be about the work, then it's going to be about the work. If they want this to be about, I don't know, promotion or just venting about recent events at the company, then it's going to be about that. They should be the drivers. Although I rarely saw this working really well. Usually, more often than not, people just show up to their one-on-ones and expect me to drive it, which takes some coaching to push back the responsibility to
Yeah.
the other end.
I mean, I found some tools that different companies have that I've used in the past can actually really help this, but you can easily replicate the functionality. But essentially, having an agenda, having a shared agenda, adding to it during the week, so people see that it's being added to, it's being treated like, oh, here's the topics, whatever. Having notes and sharing those notes afterwards, and having shared notes and maybe private notes and so on. So
Yeah.
that helps that facilitate that, and I think it's really important. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, this is why this whole topic can be super long.
Yeah. Yeah. No, maybe just a last question. I'm just curious, what do you think about this practice? I saw so engineering managers saying that we're going to have, I don't know, once a month on our one-on-ones, we dedicate the one-on-one for your career discussion. And the thinking behind this is that so we don't drop the ball on this, we don't let the day-to-day get this way. Yeah, I'm curious about what you think of this approach.
Yeah, so maybe taking a step back. The purpose of this meeting, I wrote the target outcome, what's the change in human behavior that we expect, that's kind of linked to results. Well, team members feel cared for and supported by their manager. They understand what's expected of them and receive encouragement and feedback to grow and progress in their career. So to answer your question, should we have some kind of monthly focus on their career? What I think is really helpful, so it's a continuous discussion, but what I think is really helpful is some kind of placeholder where you do like ideally you have a written plan that they write with everybody, and it's good to reflect and go back to that written plan once a month, but that doesn't absolve you from discussing what's going on through the other 3 or 4 meetings that you have before that, when it comes around to it. So I think it's great. I think it's actually really helpful to have some kind of like, at least, end of the month, we look back and we retrospect and we update the plan, but if that's the only meeting you have about it, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So, because this whole purpose of this meeting is to have that. The other anti-pattern I see is, we only meet once a month because that's all they need. Or worse, like 6 weeks, 8 weeks or whatever, or quarterly,
Wow.
like I think that's why I provide this guidance of like a good starting point is 30 minutes every week with every team member. And then I provide this kind of like, I think you can scale it like, if it's not, so I would say that every 2 weeks you should at least spend an hour with every person, which means that, okay, it's not we don't need to meet every week with this person. They're really like super autonomous. But then every 2 weeks we spend an hour and we go, a little bit deeper.
Yeah. I saw that working well also.
Yeah.
In my experience, there were some staff and senior staff people, like to your point, very autonomous, very, very, very mature, very senior. And we realized that half an hour, which is ideally 25 minutes, it's not enough to. We often saw that the discussion just starts to get interesting when we have to cut. So we switched to every second week, 1 hour, and it worked better.
Yeah, and other people need, like, the frequency varies depending on the person and what their level of, like, some people that you need that weekly check-in.
Definitely.
And then other people you actually maybe need to be talking 3-4 times a week. And it can vary. Like, you might be onboarding someone. Then it might be that you're actually
daily.
meeting daily, or even like spending blocks of time with them. or different team
Or if
members.
someone's on a PIP.
If someone's on a performance improvement plan, I mean, your goal is to get them. It's a very structured plan. I think you should be spending an inordinate amount of time with them to make them succeed their plan.
Yep.
Now,
You're right. We're getting off topic.
that's a whole other topic, but I do think like
Yeah.
I think the thing that there's an easy way to have a conversation about that frequency, which is this task relevance maturity, which is
Hmm?
And it shouldn't be in your head, and it should be something that you explicitly say, like, for these things that you're doing, how do you feel equipped and prepared? Do you feel capable of doing it? And where do you put yourself in terms of the support that you need? And then based on their answer, and you're saying, hey, I actually saw that you kind of like often go like you maybe actually need more support than you think because of this, and you give direct feedback on it. Then agree a frequency that's appropriate to that. And that's why you're saying, staff, senior people, maybe they need that frequency a little bit less, and so on. But I think that's this task relevant maturity is a great framework to have that conversation on, and yeah.
Cool.
Adjust the
Let's
frequency.
link about that something in the show notes.
Yeah, exactly. So, don't forget to take notes, share them afterwards, and so on.
Super useful for alignment and transparency and spotting misunderstandings also. That's a great practice.
Yeah. And then going on to the last of like the four meetings that I think are like crucial or rituals. It's a weekly review. I think again this is not very common. It's not like you kind of have like well, maybe there's other terms for it, but
what I find in some companies is that they mix it together with the planning one, and they just hold it together like, this is what we did, this is what we're gonna do next, and then but it's a bit confusing to mix these two.
I mean, one thing you could do is you could have the weekly review, and then if batching or whatever, you could and if you can ideally have the weekly, we can talk about the audience of this one a little bit, but if you had the whole team there, you could then do the weekly planning for the next week. So Friday afternoon you could review the week, ship your updates, ship demos, and then you do the plan for next week, and so Monday you kick off. And I mean, if your week is more like a Wednesday to Wednesday because of whatever reason, you could, and that can be because some people don't work Fridays or whatever. And I've seen a lot of teams do the week to week on a Wednesday. You could do them that way
in one session, yeah.
But I mean, they're separate things. There's separate objectives. There's separate outcomes for them. So for me, the outcome that we need from the weekly review is the team understands if they achieve their goals, and the work that they've done is clearly visualized for stakeholders, and any issues identified are being addressed. And that's the purpose of this meeting. That's the result of this meeting that you want. So it needs to happen at the end, and I just identify this duty, two parts to this. First part is kind of a reflection on the work, and making sure that any updates to whatever tool you're using for tracking your work or visualizing your work is updated. And then the second part is sharing a written update with the stakeholders and raising any issues that come up during the review. And I have like basically some guidelines for both of these. Give you the short version, just essentially review what in the review reflection part, you review, and you also there's a look back, and then you actually have to look forward as well. You start to think about what's coming up, so that you're prepared for the planning, which is the meeting after that, or on the Monday or whatever. You look at your goals and priorities. You look at your key metrics of the team. At least once a week, you should be looking at what are how are we doing? What are the metrics that we track, whether it's user metrics or engineering metrics on, wow, I can see there's a trend going up on our review times or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But look at whatever metrics you look at, and then, see, and this is, I prefer that, and maybe this is the audience question here, but I prefer if the whole team is part of this. And at a minimum,
that was one of my questions.
Yeah, So at a minimum, I think the engineering manager, tech lead, and product manager should be. I really, really feel like this is actually, it should involve the whole team. And one thing that you can do is run a retro, like a weekly mini retro. Doesn't have to take a long time, but you could run a retro, and ideally you run a retro as part of this. So you put all the stuff out there, you put the metrics, you put all these things, you put, you do the put a pin in what you actually got done in the week, and then you run a mini retro, and you then apply directly those things as you go into, the planning the session afterwards.
Yeah. The thing is, how do you help me understand the weekly review? Do you see it when the progress is demonstrated to stakeholders? Do you see it during a live event, during this review meeting where stakeholders are also present, or you think it's separate from the preparation to this presentation?
So I think the stakeholders is totally separate. This is really the team.
Okay.
This is the team. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I get it then.
My personal preference for communicating with stakeholders is because I believe that status should be async.
Yeah.
I think what you should do is ship, and I have some notes about that. So I think, like, for example, your status, you need to say, maybe there's a very short summary of what's going on in the team. Highlight maybe some key points, whatever, but it's very short, super short. Like, you're not writing an essay. People reading it don't want an essay. They make it, just give me the super cliff notes. I think then for each project, you should just literally have, this is the current project. It's on track. It's at risk, but I don't need help, or it's off track and I need your help. And what's the help? And maybe, that's where you need to get maybe slightly more verbose. Not much, but just provide more information. People will want to know why something is at risk and what are you doing about it. If you don't provide that, you're going to get a request for it. So just provide it, Tell them if you need the help, or be explicit. Say, we got this covered, Don't need you to step in and be a hippo, the highest paid person's opinion. I don't need you here. I'll call, make sure that they know that it's taken care of. You should be able to say current milestone date, what is the outcome for that milestone, next milestone coming up, and potentially a small sequence. I don't need to always have that all in there. Maybe ideally a project management tool or whatever provides some kind of out-of-the-box reporting that gives this. But if it doesn't, you need to give it. And then the other important part of it is share some kind of demos of, if you've done the wireframes or mock-ups, share those, or even better, make a mini video. Just do like a very short video walking through it. If you built a feature and it's in a particular environment, show the video, or whatever. But like, make it visual, make it visible, and that's why I don't think you don't need to run like a sprint review meeting with your stakeholders where you present something. It should be kind of like a continuous flow of showing. Maybe there are monthly or other kind of moments where you do a more reflective showcase. But I think a weekly showcase is pretty intense and a lot of work to run. And that's why I think, like, plan it at the beginning of the week, make it part of the work, and make it part of the, like, try and again, it's not about having a high bar here of production. Maybe for company-wide demo of a finished feature, that's where you put the bar for the quality of it. But so yeah, I think on the stakeholder communication, I think it's the asynchronous part here that I think is really important.
What if I'm a stakeholder and I have some comments? Like, do you advise me to reach out to the engineering manager, not to distract the team too much, or do you advise me to continue the async discussion where I saw the updates?
So
what's the best for the team?
Depends on what, it depends on what your, I think first of all, if it's like, well done team, if it's like, well done or whatever.
Let me specify, like, what often happens, and I think can be a tricky situation, is when the team sets their status as at risk, but we don't need help. And stakeholders are worried and they think, yes, you actually do need help, or convince me that you don't need help.
There's two parts to it. First part, when the stakeholder feels that, it means that you haven't communicated clearly why things are under control, even if you're at risk.
Uh-huh.
Right? So
you don't just say that I'm at risk, but I got this, but you're a bit more transparent and say, I got this, I'm going to do this, and this, and that should get us back to track.
Exactly. Like, yeah, don't, this is, don't. And look, if you miscommunicated that, then you've got to deal with whatever comes. But from a stakeholder perspective, I think it's really important as a stakeholder to withhold your judgment and seek to understand before you, like, it's so easy to say, no, let's have a meeting. I want to know, blah, 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 whatever. And then you're intervening and whatever.
It communicates mistrust.
Yeah. And so try to find a way to listen more, to say, hey, I don't understand because when I read that, I thought this. And, communicate what you're, like, find a way to help me understand this, say, like, help me understand, because I read it and I thought this immediately, like it's, seek to keep the control with the people doing the work. Don't attempt to take the control and take over and fix it. Understand why they're doing what they're doing. Maybe when you understand, it'll be all good. Maybe not, but then you can take action, at least when you understand, right? But don't just intervene. Don't that's just awful. It's awful for the people involved. And well, yeah, I mean, you're not gonna. Well,
I would even argue that if it's not a high risk project, failure can teach a lot to the team. Going through that, realizing that, oh shit, we were way too optimistic, and it was visible 2 weeks before that we're gonna be hopelessly delayed or that's a bad pass. And then going through that and learning yourself is much more valuable than a CTO coming in saying that, no, actually, you're not going to be able to do this. You should do that, blah, blah. Believe me, that's the best thing you can do.
So if you're a manager...
You rob them from the learning.
Exactly. And you're the manager of these people usually who's thinking that and, whatever, because you're also responsible for the delivery overall of what they're doing.
Yeah.
So,
it's hard.
Yeah. So clearly, where a team is repeatedly doing this, then I think this task relevance maturity thing comes in again, because they are struggling, like the first time you do learning, you can see an improvement, it's iteratively getting better, perfect. But if there's like just a pattern that's just, you have to ratchet up somehow your level of involvement. That doesn't mean you go in and micromanage, but like you have to take action. You can't let it slide, because there's a bar for what good looks like, and you have a team that's not hitting it, and that's has to.
Yeah, and even worse, if you let it slide, then it sets a bad example for other teams.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but obviously how you do that is important. So there's so this is kind of like
getting off topic again.
Yeah, no, but like this is important, and this is a good side part of this whole thing, which I'm focused this article on engineering managers, but yeah, if you manage managers, then how do you deal with some of these things? The last and I think important part is don't forget to look for the celebrations. I dive a little bit into it, but basically find ways to make, to be positive. Don't be fake positive. Everyone knows you're fake. It's fake and you don't have any trust, but look for the wins, look for the small wins, try and help, create a positive environment of like, we're now hitting the goals of we're hitting our milestone goals and we're really pleased about that. Or we discover, it's easy to celebrate the things like the brilliant inventions and all the rest. And, but like look for something, look for the small win, the little thing. And maybe it's not relevant for your stakeholders, but bring it up in the team, bring it up with the team, use those moments as a team,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's super important, and I think having all these documented, the plannings and everything, it's a great help, because then all you have to do as an engineering manager is look back what were our problems 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Because once we solve problems, it's really easy to take the current situation for granted. Like if we had an unstable build system and then today it's working okay, we just take it for granted. We don't recognize the improvement. Looking back, like what were the problems 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 1 quarter ago? Where are we now? And just making it visible for the team, it really helps them appreciate the progress that was made.
I agree. Yeah. So, that's it.
Great.
I mean, there's some tips in the article. You can check it out. I would say,
Yeah.
that's it's worth diving into.
Oh yeah, I agree. And I actually want to make a comment on, you say put these meetings in the calendar. I would go farther, put the preparation for these meetings in the calendar also, because meeting times are super expensive for a company. And going into a meeting unprepared is a colossal waste of money. So just block the time for yourself, half an hour, 1 hour before every meeting, ideally right before the meeting, when you can spend some focused time preparing for an efficient
Yeah, and
meeting.
that applies to your one-to-ones. It applies
Oh,
to all of
one-to-ones
these
for sure.
meetings. And
Yeah.
frankly,
Yeah.
I would also block out time after your one-to-one. Finish your notes, send them.
Mm.
After these meetings, plan. You're still going to be putting out some kind of update. Put that in the calendar. Boom. That's okay. We do the
Yeah.
meeting. Then I have like a short bit where I just summarize what we had. Maybe we wrote most of it live around mobbing around it, and we did it together. But then I just maybe finalize a couple bits and send it. But put
Yeah.
it there. Everything. If it's not on your calendar, it probably won't happen. Someone will steal that time, and you have to visualize. You're
Or you
visualizing
will.
your work.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And I really like your tip about scheduling gaps between one-on-ones, one-on-one specifically. I can share a personal story that I'm pretty good in taking notes during meetings, but it has a flip side, because those are rough notes. They still need to be distilled. I still need to identify action items, still need to put them to my task manager, whatever. Having back-to-back one-on-ones, it gave me the illusion that, I was taking notes during the one-on-ones. But then it gave me this anxiety of loss of control. And I realized that the fact that I don't have time to review my notes, quickly jumping into next week's one-on-one, I look back, oh shit, last week we discussed this. It was really a big source of anxiety. So yeah, scheduling some process time between one-on-ones, it's very helpful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was this week's.
Yeah, great one. Actually, can I jump in with another one?
Yeah.
Because it's I think it's super important, the retrospective. You say that in terms of team health, that's probably the most important ritual. What you still didn't include it in the 4 must-have weeklies. I'm curious, what do you think is a good cadence for this? When is the right time to include the retrospective? Any tips you can share on this?
See, my ideal cadence on this would be that as this weekly review, you have a mini retro inside it, but then you zoom back out once a month to have like sort of a more focused. In an ideal, so taking some steps back conceptually, in an ideal world, you've got some very clear goals of what you're trying to achieve throughout the quarter. You have like some set of priority that is over a longer period of time, right? You don't just fly blindly continuously, but you have like, these are the main priorities we're focusing on for this several month period. And maybe you even have some priorities over the whole year, right? And their priorities, they're not like, these are the things that we need to get done, but we need to address this issue, whatever. We need to have some outcomes around it. And so in that month, I think monthly is a pretty good moment to step back and look at that. What do we, how are we doing on that last few weeks, that 4 weeks that we just did or whatever? How are we looking on our quarterly goals? What are the main metrics in the team looking like, and so on? And I think that monthly deeper dive and then a quarterly where, that you maybe on a quarterly basis, that retrospective is actually also a prioritizing goal, like there's another cadence around the quarterly, which is you're actually the retro for the last month is a bit includes then I mean, ideally in those monthlies you may adjust your priorities a little bit because you learn. It's not like it's fixed, but that quarterly you dive a bit deeper and you project again forward over say a longer period and so on. And quarterly is a really good rhythm for most businesses, so
Yeah.
I would that's what
Like
I would say.
aligns with the financial side of the business
Yeah,
also. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Okay. No, I agree. I would even add the aspect of the retrospective is a great platform to look at how we do things, our processes, and find ways we can optimize, find ways we can experiment with. For example, the balance between sync and async stand-ups, that's a good opportunity to discuss and other, I don't know, different health issues, team health issues. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Cool. That was a very good topic. Thanks a lot. It was hard to stay within the the staying focused on the subject because it has a lot of rabbit holes that can get lost in. But
Yeah. Well,
thanks for
I
summarizing.
highly recommend the in the highlight of the week what I put in there. I actually have an extract from John Cutler, who is someone that I really enjoy following, where he has an article about troubleshooting status updates and
Yeah.
syncs. And I think that it's worth, like, if you're struggling around some of this, it's worth checking out his article that I linked to. We'll put it in the show notes as well, because it's
Actually, I can comment on one of them because one of that triggered me, not in the good way. Because his tip was about when, chaotic check-ins and status updates, and the advice or the tip was that to spend the first 10 minutes of a meeting writing your updates. And I really don't like that. I'm sorry. I think it's disrespectful and a waste of time for those who were preparing well for the meeting.
yeah,
I don't
it's
know.
kind of like
It's
a
like,
time
sorry, it's like
box.
firefighting instead of proofing your house.
Yeah, it could be, but you could see it another way, which is, like when you take 15 minutes at the beginning of a meeting to read a document together.
Yeah, I don't like that neither.
Yeah. Well, it's just one of those ways. It's like you build into the meeting the time for everyone,
Yeah.
and you don't
Yeah, there are
pre-plan
good
it, right?
aspects. Like you don't waste half a day when you only have 15 minutes to read or write something.
Yeah.
That's true.
But so, okay, fine. I mean, whatever
Yeah.
works. Find the patterns that work for you. I don't think it's
That's actually, yeah, it's a good closing point is that nothing that we advise, at least that's nothing that I advise, should be taken as the holy grail of solution for all problems. It's just options or ideas to experiment with and see what sticks with your team and what doesn't work.
exactly. Yeah.
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 Cool.
So Peter, moving on to your past week.
Okay.
I really found the insights at your experiment, actually, of using AI to code something, but the way that you did it, I found was really interesting. And I'd love for you to kind of like talk through what you did, how it worked.
Sure. Yeah, I have a part in my newsletter actually to start from further is what I'm planning for next week. And last week I was writing. It's been a long time. I coded something and I miss it. And there is this long-lasting pet project of having a home dashboard about various stuff that the family needs on an e-ink display. And one of the information I want to display is very practical. What did my daughters order for lunch at school? And do they need to bring food from home? So the end result would be having this e-ink display that shows for today, tomorrow, I don't know what are the foods and do they need to bring something. I can only get this information from a confirmation email that the school's cafeteria system is sending out after there was a purchase. So I want to have this information ideally at the end of the day in Google Calendar so I can mix it with other family events. So I need a small script or something that parses the email, takes out the information, puts it to Google Calendar. I figured as a first step, I would just move it to Google Sheets because that's a good interim format, I think. And that was the plan for this week for me, for last week actually, is to write this little parser that gets the info for an email and moves it to Google Sheet. I have some experience in Google Apps script, so I know it's doable. I had an idea how to do this. But then when I started to work on it, you know how it is when it's been some time and your skills are a bit rusty and you just, okay, so how do I use the Gmail API? How do I get the new message? So I started with ChatGPT and then the idea came that, okay, why stop here? Like, let's do the whole thing with ChatGPT. All I'm going to do is just ask questions, give feedback, communicate if something was not working, like an interactive ChatGPT session. And when it replies with a code, then I just copy paste it to Google Apps Script, run it, and yeah, continue the discussion. So that was the plan. And those of you who didn't read the newsletter, it was a success. Actually, it was surprisingly efficient. It was, at a few points, it was very fast. It's interesting how the time was going. Like the 80-20 rule, I think, applied. Like 80% of the progress was done in 20% of the time. I had something very quickly, and then 80% of the time was spent on figuring out those little bugs and getting over those little problems that ChatGPT struggled with.
Which is just like normal, like what everyone runs into.
I guess, yeah, that's how but it was interesting to see that it applies to this way of working also.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really interesting because it reminded me of an article I read this week about self-service kind of BI dashboards and tools, where
Business intelligence.
yeah, because basically this guy made a really interesting argument. He said the business, basically, in order to present or people to have a self-service dashboard, ultimately it's all SQL, right? You need to know, and so different companies build these kind of like layers on top of SQL to present the data. And he talks about the different ways that works and how those are actually kind of constructs that don't end up working. And what ends up happening is that the business still goes to someone in the data team and says, build me this dashboard or give me the data.
Yeah.
And then they don't have the best tool because they know SQL and they're technical. And you can try and add AI, but then the problem is that the business people don't understand the data and where it comes from and how it works and all the things underneath. So what he said was, it was really interesting. It segues back to, and I'll link the article in the show notes, but what he said was, the best thing to do is provide a really good, very technical interface to technical people who understand the data, understand the business, and give them AI to accelerate that, because they can correct the AI when it makes mistakes and assumptions and goes into wrong bits. And I found that really interesting because you talked about exactly the same thing. The AI got stuck in kind of like a false, like in a dead end solution.
Yeah, the story was, those who didn't read it, that it's an HTML email that I need to parse, and naturally ChatGPT was keep on jumping to trying out different XML parsers when the HTML was not valid XML. So I had, like, at one point, I don't know, 20 regular expressions, closing the BR tags and everything just to make it parsable. And when all I needed was a few texts. So I was telling ChatGPT, insisting that just use regular expressions, just find the data like this that I need. Don't try to parse the Word document, and then it worked.
Exactly, and I think this is really. I think this is the thing, right? That with both the hallucinations and the false, kind of like the dead end solutions, AI is super powerful if it kind of like it's an accelerant where you have already the technical knowledge.
Yeah.
And then it can just cut out all the boilerplate or whatever, it can help you brainstorm different options. Like you can ask it that and that back and forward. But if you give an AI to a non-technical person and you get them to try and code, I don't think you're going to get a great result, or you're going to get like some, so
It's going to be much slower.
yeah, or
It's going to be much slower because eventually ChatGPT will recognize that it's a dead end. But I think the thing is, well, two things. First of all, I think hallucinations are not a big problem with 4.0.
No, it's not.
With 3.5,
Yeah.
it was huge. Like it was coming up with non-existent libraries and everything more or less gone. The second thing is that yeah, as I said, you need to have a good idea of what you're trying to do is doable and how you're planning to do it. And then you can be insistent because ChatGPT has a very high confidence in your instructions, takes it literally often. Like when I say parse this document, they jump to the conclusion, okay, I'm going to need the parser. They don't think of just using regular expressions. And yeah, like it's almost like obeying your instructions without challenging it too much.
And I think this pattern might actually apply to lots of tools. You have human who's technical, who has actually a lot of the technical skills and a good understanding of, like in your case, like the business problem or whatever, but they have an understanding of the business problem and they're able to accelerate their work. And the article that I read is really interesting because they say, well, actually, if you have the right proper technical tooling and a great AI, that person can serve many more business units because you can produce a better dashboard faster, and it's with the real right data. And I think like I can see a world where actually when AI is not going to, we keep saying AI is not going to kill people's jobs, but it's probably the people who use AI are going to take the jobs of the people who don't. And I think this is just another example of a scenario where, like, I think in organizations where they're not equipping their staff with the right combination of tooling and AI and everything else, they're going to be left behind.
Okay, that was it this week. We still couldn't keep ourselves within 1 hour as it's usual now. But check that we have a different channel where we have extracts and shorter, more focused, more topical things, less rambling. Check that channel too, and see you here next week.